Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, thank you for being here again. Louder. Can you hear me? Hello, hello? Okay. Thank you for being here. One of the main reasons I made this film is I wanted to have conversation about the field. And so I really want us to think about, like, we just looked back, and now I want to kind of think about right now and going forward, you know? And one of the things I was thinking about, actually, I was sitting in the back corner, and I was actually having this flashback to when you had told us about, Seph, the reaction to your 15 questions about Kara Walker. And our team, we had to go back and read all the comments that you got. And it was really pretty brutal and awful. And I know that I've talked to every single person in this film and others about like what it's like to just have a public voice today, you know, and we're sitting here right now in kind of a hard, troubling moment, and there's a lot of grief and emotion and reporting and, you know, happening in our online spaces. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about kind of what it's like for you to have a public voice right now.
Okay, I can start.
Okay.
A couple things. One, I want to say that when I first got to Hyperallergic in 2016, it was April of 2016, or May, actually, I got on staff. And I don't think I had the kind of thick skin that I have now. And I think that working at Hyperallergic made that happen. I've always been a sensitive child. I'm an adult now, but I was a very sensitive child, and that sensitivity really hasn't gone away. It's just the skin on the dermis has just gotten more resilient. And I think that it just happens with having to live with a sense of, in a way, this is cliche, but it's true. My word is my bond. My words that go out in publications like Hyperallergic and the other ones I've written for, that is a representation of my sense of integrity and the way I look at the world, and I just have to own that. That's what it means to have a public voice, is to say, this representation of me that is printed in the New York Times or on CNN, that is a version of me, and I need to really be okay with that. I need to, after the editing process is done and we're ready to sort of press send, I need to be really okay with what is being said, because that is a version of me. It's not the entirety of me, but to have a public voice is, I think, to accept that reality and to do the best that you can to not, and this is one of the reasons why I don't phone it in. I don't phone it in. I don't. I put the work in. I wrestle with the thing until I find something insightful to say about it, because that's what I want to say. That's what I want to have out in the world.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I thought you did because this cut, I've never seen this cut of the film, so it's been a little emotional watching it that way. And I thought one of the things that you conveyed really well is the emotional work that goes into what all of us do. And I think that's the part that's so hidden, because we have such a, I don't know why actually, why readers don't sort of see that, but being attacked online, having death threats, I mean, I don't even know how many of any of those things I've had at this point, but like, you realize that people are going to have emotional reactions to your work by positions you take in the world, by ways you hold yourself in the world, and sort of, you know, navigate that. And I think the hardest part has been the sort of dealing with the emotional stuff, because it's so hidden. And it's not a community that necessarily celebrates that, or even asks you, do you know? of how that's going, you know? And I think that's the part where it can be really a difficult struggle. But I think you conveyed it quite well. I just want to say kudos for that, because I think you do really sort of talk about the complexity and the fact that each of us are different, you know, and we're all grappling with different things. And you made me cry on camera, which I was impressed, because I don't normally do that, but.
I don't think I've ever been shocked. I got my first hate mail when I was 21 and an intern, like in 2001 or 2 or something. That's not the shocking part. I think the shocking part is how normalized it is. It's so normalized for people to threaten your life and to threaten you with rape and just threaten you and dehumanize you and belittle you over what exactly? An opinion, the written word. And what I have to remind myself constantly is what Zora Neale Hurston said, and that's, if you're silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it. So that is my why. It's why I continue to do this work and get up every day and make it happen. Because even if I wasn't writing, just to exist in this body comes with a certain level of threat every day.
Can you talk a little bit about how you navigate that for yourselves? Like, how do you, because it's a sort of solitary thing in some ways too, right? Like what you're describing, you know, is kind of having this strength within yourself, but how do you just navigate those spaces in a way where you can keep going and keep doing it?
Well, sometimes you don't go out.
Yeah.
You just build people around you, a network of people who are supportive and get it.
Yeah.
And you sort of really value those people, and you try to keep them close, and you trust those opinions, and you try to do that, and you get a therapist, and you take up going to the gym, and you do, you know, all that stuff. You collect things, or you know, whatever, you know, smoke pot or whatever. You navigate it the way you navigate it.
Yeah.
And I think it's all those tools at the same time.
Yeah.
But the network around you is really key.
I just want to add about the therapist thing. That's key for me. That's huge. And I want to just say this really quickly. It's a slightly pedantic point, but for those of you who don't see a therapist, there's no downside. Real talk. Like, at the very least, a therapist gives you a safe space in which you can say anything. And you can get in touch with parts of yourself that you didn't necessarily know before you started talking were there. That's huge. And also, I want to just quickly relate an anecdote that has to do with a piece that I wrote that Hrag edited. The last big piece, the longest piece I wrote for Hyperallergic, which was
About being a critic?
yes,
That one?
art criticism as a way of life. I gave Hrag a rough draft of that, and he sat down with me and he said, and I knew that, and like Hrag, when he's serious, he sits down with you. He's like, let's take a minute. And he sat down with me and he said, I know this part here, you're writing like you're an art outsider. You're not. Like you're an insider. And here you're emphasizing too much about like the people who pissed you off or the ways you felt injured. And I went back home and I thought, yeah, I need to change the tone. And I thought, I'm going to write it like I'm writing to a friend. I'm going to explain it like the situation like I'm explaining it to a friend. And that's a way of coping. It's like not imagine that there's the enemy at my gate when I'm writing, but rather that I'm explaining to someone how it is to live this life in a way that I assume will be a sympathetic, yes, to a person who I assume will be a sympathetic ear.
Yeah. Yeah. Go.
I was just going to say also therapy,
Yes.
but the downside is the dating part of it. You got to find the right fit, and that part isn't fun. I think my brother's here, and I'm super excited about that. For me, part of it is therapy and yoga, my dog died this year, but my dog was like a huge part of my processing all of the hate. But having people like my brother and people who know me before all of this helps. And once a year, I don't do this anymore because I'm a deputy managing editor now, so I can't talk the way columnists and critics typically talk and call people motherfuckers the way I like to. But once a year for the first 15 years of my career, my coworkers would look forward to that one day a year I would allow myself to cuss someone out on the phone. And it was called the I Got Time Today. And today is the day. Today is the day. I'm gonna remind you, I'm from the area. I'm mumbo sauce and go-go music, and you can catch these hands.
Yes, Jeneé. Oh my gosh. All right, so related to this, let's talk about kind of the role of community in your work, and how important is it for all of you to feel like you have an audience that has nothing to do with online spaces and algorithms and all of the kind of audience dynamics that happen in those spaces. And I know, I think it is important to say Jeneé is no longer writing her column at the moment. We're kind of hoping she'll get back to writing at some point, but she's got this big fancy new job and is basically helping to really shape the Boston Globe, which is one of the best regional papers in the country, so that's huge. However, yes, I love that in 1,000 ways. I'm also super happy to know that A Beautiful Resistance will keep going, and that feels like, I don't know, participatory, community-driven journalism, and so unlike anything I've seen before. Can you just, all of you, but maybe starting with Jeneé, talk about the role of community in building an audience today?
First, community is why I do what I do, even before A Beautiful Resistance existed. And then with A Beautiful Resistance, once they asked me to take on this role in senior leadership, I kind of protected it. I was like, obviously, I'm not going to be able to write my column as much, but ABR must go on. So that is the work, the creative work I'm still allowed to do, which has also put me in the role of artist, which is great. For that, community is everything. It is the driving force. It is why I did it. The Boston Globe readership is literally 90% white. We have one of the most expensive subscriptions in the country, but my events are predominantly Black and free, and they often sell out. So I do live events where we screen an episode of A Beautiful Resistance, and then we have almost like a live pod with 3 special guests who come out with one-on-one conversations, and then there's a DJ, and we party and dance and are in communion with each other. And for me, that's kind of a corrective to what the industry has done to marginalize people, and it's a way to build a bridge. Because it's not that people of color and marginalized folks don't have money. We have money, and journalism is lazy by saying, oh, these people aren't our subscribers because they're not your subscribers because they don't trust you, and you have looked at them as products to cover rather than understanding you need to be in community with the community. Yeah. So that's how I am doing it.
Yeah. And you also, just to go back, you bring community in through the work itself too, which is, you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so for my videographers, I bring in people who are not in the business, who love doing video work, often artists or independent filmmakers, normally under 30 or under 35, all of color, and pay them. I typically double their rate when I can, and it has allowed them to have other opportunities. So a lot of the work is made in tandem with other artists in the community, or amplifying people like Golden, who you saw doing their poem, and just making sure they have space to share their creative visions or the various ways in which they do the things they love.
I'd agree in terms of most of what I do is for the communities I feel part of. I feel like what I do is to improve communities. I want to improve those communities I am part of. And I think that's really important. But I will say that I feel like we work, at least when it comes to the art field, I think we work in a field that doesn't want communities, they want individuals. And I think that's a really kind of a tension that I'm very conscious of to navigate. People want individuals to represent communities, but they want you to bring your community with you. And I think that's something that we're really sort of struggling with right now, because I think we have to create new audiences. I feel like from day one, when we did what we did, and I think I did it with my own personal blog, was I feel like every day I'm building an audience. And every single one of those readers, we fought to, become part of our readership. And I feel like that's the thing that we forget to do sometimes, is we don't just make art, we don't just make writing, we build audiences. And I think that's really important.
And I think it happens in places even like on Facebook. I took myself off of Twitter about, 6 months ago because, But and on Facebook, what I find is I can pose a question about a passage of art criticism I've read, or a poem I've come across, or a TV show I watched, and people join in sometimes quite robustly, and then a whole conversation emerges. That's a community. That is, in fact, I remember when my mom passed away, I think it was 2 years ago. Now, I went on Facebook and I posted a picture of the picture that shows up in the film, actually, of me as a 5-year-old? 5, I think? Yeah. And my mom and dad and my sister. And I talked about my mom passing away. And over 1,000 people commented. And I thought, what? Like people I hadn't heard from in years, and they said something consoling about that loss. And I thought, that also is community.
Yeah, I mean, those spaces, I personally, the way I feel about them is they have so much good and so much bad. And I never know, I literally feel like I just live with this question all the time. Like I have had experiences like that in those spaces. I have seen reporting in the early days from Gaza that I was not seeing anywhere else. And yet I also know those are spaces where we are being manipulated, including by state powers sometimes, in very, very dangerous and deeply insidious ways, which is one of the reasons I asked that question, how do you navigate that? Do you guys feel like that, does that question haunt you and live with you too?
I mean, yes, at least for me. I mean, all the time. That's why we do what we do.
Yeah.
It's knowing that we have to create alternative sources of information. I mean, it's as much for us as it is, for other people, and being able to do that reporting. But I mean, I think of it all the friggin' time. I think about the fact that we are products sometimes and media, and I mean, those are all conversations we're having. At least, whether it's in the office or at home or with each other or in our writing. So,
Yeah. Anybody else? I have a really good question right here. Are you guys ready?
Let's do it.
I don't know who wrote this. Who in this group is most likely to come for Roberta Smith and Jerry Saltz's jobs? Thank you for the question, audience member. Yeah. I mean, it's a great question in a way because, would you even fit that mold? Any of you? Would you? Yeah, right? But I
mean, the thing is, first of all, Hrag, let's just recognize that Hrag has built with Viken an entirely different publication, which Deborah Bremer, for some odd reason, said was sometimes too political. What does too political?
That. She's
what
here,
does
I
that
think.
mean?
She's right over there. Yeah.
Okay, but they've created another venue for different types of voices. So I think Hrag, I'm just going to talk for you for a second, doesn't want that job, either of those jobs, right? I think you've done something that really kind of supersedes what they've done. And me, I don't think I want it. I mean, honestly, bless their hearts, they do a service that I think is quite useful for a lot of audiences, really, genuinely. And I think that Roberta in particular brings a sense of the historical to her critiques generally, a sense of that sort of bird's eye view of the art historical landscape that I think is valuable. I don't want to do that. I'm not interested. It's just not what I'm in the game for.
I hate to echo the crowd, but I mean, I don't aspire to that. I think I respect them. Obviously, the work they do is really important, but that has never, ever been my aspiration. I probably aspired to Jay-Z before I aspired to them.
Yeah.
I think what they do is deeply important. I think without knowing it or intentionally doing it, they also uphold a certain system that I've deeply been against my entire life. So that's just, I grapple with being deputy managing editor at an institution. Like, that's something I grapple with every day, the role I sit in, and I have told them that I probably will only do this for 2 years after I bucket list some structural changes I want to make.
Yeah.
And then I will return to being
Yeah.
a columnist who says motherfucker a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I'm looking forward to both of those things, by the way. Yeah.
Can I just add
Yeah.
one thing? I think Seph's right. I don't want the job, but it's partly because I don't want their audience. Like, I don't speak to that audience so much. I don't need to talk to the upper sides in Manhattan. Do you know what I mean? That's not my audience. And it's fine if they want to read me. That's totally cool. You know?
Yeah.
But that's not who I actually wake up in the morning and go, that's the audience I want to talk to.
Right.
And that's part of
But
it
then I guess
too.
the question is, if you're in a position of power at a newspaper, is that what that position has to be going forward? Like, we've had this mold of what an art critic is. And I think your experience so Jeneé has sat on the committee to decide the Pulitzer for criticism the last few years. And the last few winners of that prize are not the Roberta, and these are people who could be in those positions. It's about change, right? So at what point did the publications make that position look different?
So it's equal parts the publication, but also the person feeling empowered to, it's like the publication, but also what is their support system? How are we all talk about the glass ceiling and when you're the first, but no one talks about how you get cut and who's there to help heal those wounds.
Yeah.
So I do think those positions could change. It's just, how are we going to make it so? Being chair of the Pulitzer jury for criticism was deeply honored to do it, and then sitting on it the year prior was great. But I can honestly say, I was arguing a lot. Less so this year. This year was a little easier, but the first year I was arguing a lot. There was a lot of spirited discussion around what criticism should be. And I know as a columnist that has often been my plight with how judges see my work and how audiences read my work and how editors and other journalists see my work. My work has been deeply interrogated for all of my career because it doesn't fit in a box and they don't know what to make of it.
Yeah.
So how are we nurturing people to have the stamina it takes to make new roles is my question.
Yeah. And how do you answer that question? I mean, you are
as a whole. We're not. I mean, I am. Everyone on this stage. You clearly are. Seriously, a hand.
Yes.
But as a whole, this industry still isn't doing it. It just isn't. This industry is still burning people out, wearing them thin, and stomping on them, and then saying, "Look at how we changed."
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about why that's hard for you at the Globe? Like, in this new position, and you're trying to make these changes, and you don't want to do it for very long because it's hard. Can you talk about?
I'm the second Black woman in the Globe's entire history to be on the newsroom masthead, and I love our new editor, Nancy. She's amazing, and Jason Tuohy is probably going to go down as one of the biggest champions of my journalistic career. So I'm never going to sit up here and say I don't have support. I have it, but I also have it in weird ways. Like, the people who I just named love me and support me, but I think that my department heads still struggle to see me beyond my column and to see me beyond the radical troublemaker. So when I sometimes say, this is how we're going to start doing things now, or I initiate new ways of very simple things of how we deal with interns or welcome someone in their first week in the newsroom, it's almost like they always think that I'm coming for them or attacking them or calling them a racist, which is really weird because I've watched white male editors talk shit to other white editors and really demean them.
Yeah.
And they all go about their day. And then I say something like, hey, some of these things we do are really racist. And they're all like, Jeneé hates me. I'm like, shut the fuck up and grow up.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's those kind of things. It's like being covered in mosquito bites all day. It's like, is this work important? Yes. Do I feel called to do it? Yes. Do I feel like I can do this for the rest of my life? Hell no. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it well, and I'm going to do it with love and create space. But I also think we get in positions like, I don't want to come for our pristine art critics. But one of the reasons why I say I don't aspire to be them is because when people get power, they hoard it. And I think 2 to 4 years is a long enough time for me to have a role like this before it's time for me to be ushering the next troublemaker to sit in my seat.
Yeah.
So,
I love that.
So I want to talk about that in terms of doing the opposite, like not hoarding power, but finding ways to support people. I'm a freelance writer now. When I was in Venice last year on assignment for a piece I was writing for Hyperallergic about Simone Lee's convening,
Yeah.
a woman named Camille Bacon, who turns out to be MacArthur Binion's studio manager in Chicago, came up to me. She recognized me and she said, "Are you Seph Rodney?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I've read you, and reading your piece, I forget which one it was, inspired me." So I made time to meet up with her in New York, and subsequently she's asked me for advice on how to apply for the, what to do in terms of her application for the Arts Writers Grant.
Yeah.
And so we sat down and we talked through that, and I've done that sort of thing with a few people, and it kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, ad hoc community. But this is the way that I feel like I can be of use to people, not pulling up the ladder behind me, but actually reaching back and saying, here's how I negotiated this, here's how you might do it, here's what might be successful for you.
Yeah.
I think that's crucial.
Yeah.
I think that's a means to move forward.
Yeah.
I was just going to say one thing, which is I don't think institutions change. I think they co-opt. And it's actually my poli-sci friends initially when we started, I knew that creating Hyperallergic would make change by people co-opting us, and it has. Do you know? And I think that's kind of I think the idea of institutions changing in this sort of very meticulous way.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true, or maybe at least not in my experience.
Yeah, I'm with you. And this gets to a subject you and I have talked about too, which is just the structure of your publication and what that allows. I mean, the thing that's amazing about Hyperallergic is you have a level of independence that's extremely rare, right? You have, your editorial decisions and your commercial decisions are coming from the same people. And that allows you, a lot of things don't stick to you the way they do in other structures, right? Can you just talk a little bit about that, and specifically what people who maybe are going to go into this field someday should know about who they write for?
I mean, my first advice is to figure out who's paying you and why, and what they actually get from you. And I think there's too much idealism. Oh, they just want critique. And you're like, no, nobody wants that. Honestly, most people, they're going to want it for something because they want to invest in art or they want to understand something or whatever. But it's not just because they want some, critique, because there's no money behind that, right? And these are, at the end of the day, people need to get paid. I will sort of shout out my husband, Viken, who's here, because it's also
Viken.
He's probably the most underpaid of our whole team. Because he could easily do what he does for double the money.
And he works 95 hours
he works
a week.
a billion hours. So it's also partly we all believe in the mission, right? And I think that's part of it. So I think thinking about that and then realizing that your words are going to be part of this sort of bigger structure and understanding what the bigger structure is.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key. I think too many people don't think about that and then go, wait, what? A billionaire is asking me to censor this article? Oh my God. It's just no kidding. Of course it's going to. I mean, this is how this stuff works.
Yeah.
Grow up.
Yeah, but also, as someone who's had to work within the system throughout my career, I have to say that there is a way to break the rules and break them good. And I've always done that. I've always been a thorn in the publisher side. Until the Globe, I mean, I can honestly say, like, for the Globe is not where it needs to be. We're doing a lot of work, a lot, so much. But when they recruited me and slid in my DMs and I flew out there, the first thing I said is, I'm Black with a capital B, and I write for Black people. And that's just not gonna change. I talk shit, and if you say something I don't like, I'm gonna tell you, and if you don't give me the Phil Jackson of editors, I'll quit. And I said all of that before we even had an offer on the table, and they still hired me. And every step of the way, whenever I did something that was out of the box of what they usually do, we wrestled, and a lot of times I won or they let me win.
Yeah.
And a beautiful resistance would not exist at any other institution. It should be at something alternative or nonprofit.
Yeah.
So there is a way to break the system if you have some good co-conspirators. So I would just say to anyone going into the business, wherever you land, you have to be your first revolution and then find people willing to lay the bricks with you.
I love that so much. Amen to that. I'm getting like signals over here. So this is a super short panel, but I want to leave you with one question, which is just, what is making you feel hopeful about the future of writing about art, and what can we, as people in this room, do to support your work?
This film makes me feel hopeful about the prospects of writing about art. It genuinely does. And I think what people can do to help support my work is generally, honestly, cultivate. I think what we're trying to do, and this sounds so old school, but I think it's honestly true, is all of us on the stage, we're actually trying to raise people's consciousness. Like, kind of bottom line, like that's the revolution. And I feel like if you all, within the sound of my voice, cultivate an attitude of being more aware of what's happening in the world, being more sensitized to it, is actually a good place to be. People like us will thrive. Like, that's the, it is in some cases not a minuscule adjustment, but it is about valuing the idea of having a critical consciousness, like being aware of the world and not being afraid of it.
Well, I mean, I loved hearing your story about like working in a bigger institution. I feel like part of what I think would help, not only obviously read us, you know, just sort of, it's you know, to be part of that sort of air, but also sometimes, you know, think about not stopping someone from doing something. And I feel like there's been so many barriers people put up for the most ridiculous reasons, and usually, like, haters are exhausting. They are so exhausting. And you know, just figure out, if you're saying something critical, if you're doing something, are you stopping that because you just don't understand it? So get out of our way sometimes, do you know? And I feel like this is the thing where, especially when people talk about politics, I was like, you don't have to agree with their politics, but maybe get out of their way and let them try something new. And I feel like it's the same thing, like, let people try something.
What gives you hope?
Well, I think that part gives me hope, and your story gave me hope, actually, because I feel like those are exactly that, like, people sort of allowing space, and sometimes saying, you know what, I don't have to write about that, or I don't have to comment, or I don't have to do this, and think about, is me giving those people space, allowing them to dream a little bit?
Yeah.
And for me, that's hopeful.
That's beautiful.
Agreed.
I think, I mean, how you can support the work is bostonglobe.com/a beautiful resistance.
Yes. And subscribe.
$1 for 6 months. Preferably click it from A Beautiful Resistance. So, you know, that transversion thing. Converter rate counts. Instagram /A Beautiful Resistance. Share your Beautiful Resistance. And if there's any grant writers, we need money. But as far as hope goes, 2 things. First, I was also at a Loophole Simone Lee, and I've been carrying it with me for a year. I'm supposed to write about it. I've spent time with Simone, which she doesn't grant journalists often, and I still have not written this piece because part of me is so fucking selfish that I don't want anyone else to have it.
Oh.
It was very much for all of the Black women who were there, and every day I kind of think about Italy and what it was to be with them and how they're just like literally my loophole of retreat. So part of my hope is that, and one day I'll eventually write it out and share it and stop being selfish. My other hope is what I said in the film. We're all here. We're breathing. We woke up today. It's a big fucking deal. A lot of people did not wake up, are struggling to be awake, to exist. So every second that we are awake, we're possible, which means it's possible for us to help other people realize their possibilities. And honestly, if you don't have hope, there's no chance for the revolution, period. We cannot reach liberation if we are not hopeful, imaginative, and dreaming for it.
It's a practice, right? Yeah. Well, I just want to say that you all have given me enormous amounts of hope. All 5 of you, Carolina and Jen, raise your little hands over there. Yep. And like I said, I really want to take this movie to journalism schools and art schools and just have a whole bunch of up and coming writers be super inspired by you guys. And I love you, all 5 of you. I love your work, and I will read it for as long as you make it. That is a fact. And thank you everybody for coming. We'll see you upstairs.